Welcome to another episode of Inkathacast. This is the IFP Untold. I am your host, Yaseen Carelse. Today I am extremely privileged, and it is such an honor to have one of our IFP stalwarts introduce the series to our listeners and our viewers today on the stories of Inkatha, the stories we've never told as a party about ourselves, the stories of our leaders, who they are, where they come from, where we come from, what our journey into politics has been. It's been 49 years since the start of the party in 1975 on the 21st of March, when the Zulu cultural movement Inkatha Yesize was started. I'm very honored to introduce my guest this afternoon and this evening, if you are watching in the evening, Mr. Senzo Mfaya, who's a former member of the National Assembly from 1994 to 1999. His father also served a time in the KwaZulu Legislative Assembly, the KLA, in the former KwaZulu Authority. And he's also his late brother, Senzo Mfaya, who just passed on during the time of COVID. Unfortunately, may his soul rest in peace. But no stranger to politics, someone who's born into the politics and to the world of politics. We'll get to know Mr. Senzo Mfaya a little bit more, and some of the stories that has shaped his journey into politics. Another item, just to mention, that Mr. Mfaya is also the Chief Executive Officer of the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation. It is an honor. Welcome, Mr. Mfaya. How are you?
I'm glad to be here, and I'm quite excited that the party has moved such a distance in terms of technology. Now I'm imagining our days back in the 70s and early 80s. This is so far away from where we were at the time. I remember one of the best cars we had was this Land Rover, a glorified wheelbarrow, where the aircon was this thing you'll pull,
Wow.
and in front a flap will open. That's the only way you'll get some kind of air in. If you close that, you have to open the windows. But we drove around that day and night to mobilize for this party and to spread the word all over the place.
Fantastic. Mr. Mfaya, you're ushering in this new era. This is a very first episode that we are hosting with you at the helm and as our guest. Tell us a little bit more about your background. For those who don't know, this is a platform also for IFP listeners and people that have been part of the party, that have departed, they've left the party, they might find themselves overseas, they might find themselves in different cities right now, they were former members of the party and members of the party. So about your background specifically, and how did you get started in politics?
In a way, I was born into politics because all my grandparents lived with the head of the 1906 rebellion, Zulu rebellion, where they were young, but they saw everything they thought was their life being ripped apart. That was a defining moment. The king was arrested, the king died in exile. You were castigated if you had your Zulu regalia on. So their whole world was turned upside down. The land that they thought they owned was taken away from them, the cattle, the produce that they had was taken away from them. So I was born into that hate from my grandparents. So in a sense, general South African politics was something that I would never been able to escape. I spent most of the night sleeping with my grandmother because my grandfather had 3 wives. So I would sleep with my grandmother, Umadlala. And her name was Unomabhuku. She got that name because she never got to live with her father. Her father was taken away by the English. Wow. So the neighbors and the family saw her father's name being written in this big book by the officials of the British Army when he was being taken away. So when the child was born and the father went in some island as a prisoner, then the child was called Nomabhuku. So some nights, I don't know what will happen, what will instigate this. Some nights I'll wake up and find her crying and singing at the same time. Singing the war songs that their fathers used to sing in 1906.
Wow.
I don't know whether too many people understand that the 1906 thing was very much about black people refusing to pay tax without representation. That time back, they were saying no. As a result, they were ripped apart, their land taken away, their cattle taken away. So in some sense, I grew up in that pain because there was no TV at the time. There was no radio even. So the stories that will be told by old men and old women in the village, that will be told by my family, related to that incident more than any other. So they will sing war songs from that period. So I became very much aware very early in my life. But as for the IFP, the movement became the talk of the town very quickly when it got formed. And people who knew Prince Buthelez's father and his grandfather were very excited because the theory that they went about on was that, here is Matole's son, mobilizing people. When people are mobilized sufficiently, the Boers are going to get us. We are going to crush them. At that point, a lot of people did not believe that this talk of fighting for liberation peacefully was a Buthelezi thing. They believed that his history told them that this is King Dinuzulu's grandson. This is Mathole Buthelezi's son. When he's mobilized sufficiently, one day the sun will not rise. So I even before I met any leader of the IFP, or even before I met the organization, the old men in my village will talk about that. That now the day is coming. One day the sun will just not rise the whole day because Dinuzulu's grandson is on it now.
How did they transmit information, Mr. Mfaya? I think this is also great to the story you tell of the 1906, the injustices of then, and then finally there's a moment in your history where your father can tell you of King Dinizulu's grandson coming to bring about justice in a way that you thought would be a violent way, in a way that, you know, as a young boy you learned those stories of the injustices against the Zulu people. How did it feel for you then at that moment, and how did you guys communicate? There's no cell phones at this time. It's difficult for us to understand.
Every evening, as a family, we'll sit around the fire. Every weekend, especially on Sunday, men will sit together and talk and share experiences, share their own stories. And my grandfather, for instance, will go and meet other men who are older than him, and they will share stories that he didn't know. When he comes home, he will read those stories to us. And in that way, the story kept being told.
Okay.
On and on and on, in spite of the technology shortcomings that we had at the time. Just when possibly I was over 10 years old, my grandfather bought this, what was called a radio thing that you played with batteries. That was the first time I saw a radio. And but the problem is that he would listen to it alone. And the stories he hears from his radio, he will then tell us. We were not allowed to sit with him and listen to the stories that came through the radio. So in that way, the word of mouth. One of the things I remember pretty well is that most Sundays, I think it was month end, there will be huge congregation of men at home. Because remember, black people were not allowed to buy liquor. And my grandfather worked at Edward Hotel. And at Edward Hotel, he made friends with some colored fellow who once a month would buy him 2 bottles of White Horse. Liquor. And every man in the village on that particular Sunday will be there to drink that White Horse.
Wow.
From those White Horse bottles. And they had this funny thing, they will sit around the house, Rondavel, and the youngest in the house will then be tasked to go around the house, open the bottle, pour a little bit on the floor, and then pour on the bottle lid, give the eldest in the room. Now, this fellow's eldest in the room will quickly
take a shot,
and then and close his eyes and say,
Was it that strong?
I have no idea. But imagine something like 30, 35, 40 people coming around to drink 2 bottles of White Horse.
It was an occasion.
Yeah, every Sunday afternoon. They will come and enjoy this thing. And stories were told in that context. These fellows were not drinking to get drunk. They just enjoy this pleasure of sitting in a room and drinking White Horse, which is prohibited.
That makes it all the more sweeter, I suppose.
Yeah.
So our perception of that time, was it always about the struggle? Was it always about the injustices of the apartheid government at the time? And as you now mentioned, a moment of relaxation and pleasure for our generation, we do think that it was very tough that time to grow up to be a child, to be a young man or a young woman that time. You know, what were people preoccupied with?
Oh, it was extremely difficult. But in some way, people found a way to live. There was a lot of life. A lot of it. We grew up seeing our grandfathers, our fathers having absolute ball from time to time. And come to my age, there are things I honestly want to forget.
Okay.
Because we, in spite of the toughness of the times, we find a way to live. We lived.
When you look back at that time now, and you think of the context of the South African political context we find ourselves in now, what do you want to say to young people right now? Is it, you know, a word of advice for us, or perhaps if you juxtapose your experience of then, and you bring, like, you know, we made it through, you were resilient, you were stronger then, you're a tough generation, and today we have all these amenities and facilities and this freedom that we have, but what is it that you'd say to a young person in this generation that we're not seeing, that we're not used to, that we should be a bit more stronger?
If there's one thing that I'll advise young people on, is please be informed. Yes, school is absolutely essential in that process, absolutely essential. There came a time during our growing up where, without government announcing, school was compulsory. Men of the village would not allow any child to go without education. But even if you've not been to school, please be informed. Because there's nothing that you will not understand if you've put yourself in a position where you have information. You don't have to have a degree, you don't have to have a master's degree. At your level where you are, please be informed.
There you have it, young folks. Make sure to join, like, and subscribe at Inkathacast on our IFP YouTube channel. I'm joined by Mr. Simo Brian Mfayela, Mr. Senzo Mfaya, the two brothers. I keep on getting this wrong. But I'm joined by Mr. Senzo Mfaya, one of the IFP stalwarts, also the CEO of the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation. We will be right back. Couldn't have said it better when you say to young people that information is power. And similar to how we are trying to share information, so do make sure that you do share this with your family, your friends, your loved ones. And some people might need to hear these things that you're saying. And information is power, and we have no excuses, young people, not to share information. Or we don't need degrees and masters and doctorates to be able to share information. It's so much easier for us as this generation, yet the type of information we share has become almost irrelevant on a day. Concentration spans are about 15 seconds to look through a video, and there you go. And we take for granted what we have as young people today. And so on education, Mr. Mfaya, tell us about your time moving from, as a young man, going to Fort Hare. That must have been such a big privilege as well. And to do remind our listeners of what context you find yourself in, because education was limited for black people specifically. But during that time, you were able to attend one of the most prestigious institutions of higher learning. What was that like?
The IFP spoke very much about something that was called Green Revolution. You wouldn't go to any IFP meeting and not hear about this. The idea was that we needed to encourage our members and the community in general to produce their own food and be self-sufficient. We even tested this. We encouraged our members to stop eating white bread. Stop eat white bread, because the idea was that we were going to increasingly add on the basket of things we do not eat, and replace them with the things we're able to produce themselves. I was so sold on that idea that I decided I was going to do a degree in agriculture, and completely forgot that agriculture is a science, and I had not done science at high school. So I applied for it. One day, a postcard come through from the post office. You have been accepted. Off to a train down to the Eastern Cape. Now the interesting thing with this was that this was not just my thing. My uncles were there at the station. My aunts were there. All relatives who could make it were there. And at the Durban station here, we met a lot of my school colleagues, friends that were at high school with. Them as well were in the same boat. Now imagine early in the year, Feb or so, carrying 6 boiled chicken in your bag, steamed bread, 6 of them, because different sections of the family made food for you. So on this first trip we used a train. By the time we got to Bloemfontein, the food was really getting off now. We were getting desperate. We needed to eat this whole stuff because it was getting bad. So we left Durban on a Wednesday, only arrived in Alice, Eastern Cape, Friday evening.
Okay.
So all that time spent on a train. So arrived there, got the absolute shock of my life at the amount of science that was in agriculture. Because this course I had chosen deliberately had to have science, economics, finance, because it was preparing you as a student to be able to translate agricultural information for an ordinary farmer who is unable to read. So you needed to know price theory.
Wow.
You needed to know how to build a bridge on a farm. I remember we fought with the professor the whole afternoon when he told us that for a bridge to be sustainable, it has to move. Because we were sure as students that when we put that concrete and steel there, this thing can't move an inch.
Damn, I couldn't even understand.
Yeah, so when the professor came and said, "You are wrong, this thing has got to move," we were hurt badly. Another really bad experience was the surveying
Of land.
surveying equipment, because it's upside down. Because surveying equipment is made to work underground in the mining industry. So now here's this three-legged thing that you must now use, and it's upside down, and you try to even find a shade to stand so that you can come from the top. So it was quite an experience to find myself there with students from all over South Africa and learning a subject that I thought was going to help me contribute a lot in this thought of a green revolution. Because we kept talking about it, but it was not taking off properly. So this went on. First year, fine. Second year. Every year there will be strikes. One issue or the other. And this one year, we had continuous strikes from about around May till around August. So, non-stop. It's at that point that I got kicked out of varsity. I always say exactly like umntwana. A lot of people got kicked out of varsity. I don't know what I was kicked out of varsity for.
Not for disruptions. Your own fees must fall if you may.
I can't claim any stake in leadership of students and things like that. I think I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then kicked out of varsity. Came back home with all these ideas running through my head. Already then I was a staunch member of the IFP. I was very, very much involved in the IFP affairs. I was corresponding frequently with umntwana.
Did you join at university, or did you join in your hometown? Of hearing about the IFP, let's get back to when we started.
I joined long before varsity.
Okay.
My first face-to-face encounter with umntwana was when he came to Ndwedwe to open an agricultural center that was bringing agricultural services closer to people. So his speech at that function really, really motivated me to come closer to the party. But for about a year or so after that, I was stuck in football and did not really participate. again until the same gentleman, Kosnatindelu,
Okay.
just told me, your life in football has just ended because your party needs you.
Wow.
So going down to 40, I'm already a member.
Okay.
Came back, started to, first there was a long campaign of trying to get us back to 40. That included people like Fanzel Slabet, included people like Archie Kumede from the UDF, and nothing worked. So I started looking for work. I got employed by KwaZulu government,
Okay.
late 1982.
Okay.
At the time of my employment, I worked in the same office with Musa Zondi, Kosnatindelu, Obizizwe Nkehli, and a few other guys. Now imagine me at that age, employed by government, and now being told that the mainstay of my employment was establish a training center, because KwaZulu government wanted about 45 well-trained adult educators,
Okay.
because they wanted to establish a world-class literacy program.
Wow.
Then I got stuck in a place called Mhlungwane outside Ulundi. So my life was between this training college and running to Ingwavuma to deal with the problem of the South African government wanting to take that portion of South Africa and give it to Swaziland.
Ah, I see.
So I was running between the two programs. As it turns out, that program, although it's not spoken about, because that KwaZulu government program was world class. It turned the whole of Ingwavuma, Kwangwanase area just like that. Once people were able to pick up a newspaper and read, it turned their lives around in an unimaginable way. That's why, for instance, most of the time you find that we learned very quickly. That's myself, people like Reverend Zondi, Nkosnatindelu, that there is so much pleasure in servicing. I didn't need to be an elected leader. If I could just find that little space and provide a proper service, there was so much joy in that. Seeing that whole community turning around was a marvel.
Wow.
It's something that I'll go to grave with.
So you say public service is a calling. Would you call it that?
Yes.
Or you were called to it, at least?
Yes, through a series of incidents.
That shaped you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I suppose at the heart of it, you wanted to provide food
Yeah.
for the community and sustenance and the green revolution, and that was a sense of service deep within you for others. It was not for yourself.
Yeah.
And so having to do that in your community. It's funny, Mr. Mfaya, we looked at a map today about KwaZulu, and that's very part of the country's map that's now part of Swaziland, we'd say, or Eswatini. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, that part never became part of Swaziland.
Ah,
We resisted right up to the end. Mntwana Margaret Thatcher herself visited Ulundi. And Mntwana told her in no uncertain terms that if there's one thing that will make him take up arms, is that incident. and told her that one thing he would appreciate is a meeting with Ronald Reagan. Margaret Thatcher left here. She was in Ulundi. And phoned Ronald Reagan, got him to an appointment. Mntwana was in Washington, and he told, because the Americans were behind the whole thing. Mntwana told Ronald Reagan, no, you don't touch that land. That fell apart on that strength. But the other thing that people don't know is that for that whole scheme to fall apart, it lost the support of the SADC leaders. Amongst the people we praise for that is Moses Mabhida, the man our big stadium is named after, because he was the ANC representative in Mozambique.
I see.
A big fan of Mntwana. Big fan of Mntwana. He organized for us to meet with President Samora Machel. He organized for us to meet with Robert Mugabe. Then a delegation of the IFP was sent to a meeting of all the Southern Africa leaders that was held in Harare, where we explained ourselves in our stand. Although they started supporting this transfer of land from criminal South Africa to Swaziland, when they heard our case, they changed their stance. So all leaders of Southern Africa told Swaziland, get out of that. And one of the persons who helped us a great deal to achieve that is Moses Mabhida.
Oh, fantastic. Well, how fitting that we launched our manifesto there.
Sir?
And, how fitting that we launched our manifesto at the stadium named after him.
Yeah.
And filled that stadium. But Mr. Mfaya, in terms of that, you were part of that delegation, I believe.
To Harare.
Not to the Harare delegation. Oh, we were coming there. I'm jumping the gun here. Were you part of those negotiations? You were at first.
No. At that point, negotiations were between KwaZulu government and the central government, so I was not directly involved.
Okay.
My job was to make people reject this thing as vehemently as possible. The opposition voices from the ground were getting louder and louder and louder and louder, and I was part of the team.
So you're an organizer.
Yeah,
a ground organizer. Yeah. Most critical job, really.
Yeah, I was part of the team that was responsible for that, to make people realize what it means to leave their South African citizenship behind and become citizens of Swaziland.
Okay. Did you know at the time that you were good at that? At convincing people, at rallying people together behind some cause?
There was no option. There was no time really to stand back and say, am I good at this or not?
But now in your later years, if you look back,
Yeah.
that you were able to get masses of people on your side.
Yeah, it was just a matter of
Doing the job.
doing the job. Whether we are good at it or not, didn't quite count. You were placed there, here's a job, you better do it and do it good. And we all learned to do it good.
And your journey during KwaZulu government? As a young man, give us more or less about 23, 24 years old, in your early 20s. How did you grow in the administration?
That was almost a disaster. Because you see, the officials in KwaZulu government that came from Pretoria. Because KwaZulu government was a homeland. So the officials seconded by Pretoria to work for Zulu government. So them and us were oil and water. We used to have these, terrible clashes.
I recall from my reading that even some of the police commissioner, for instance, that was brought from Pretoria to basically ensure that the project of KwaZulu government fails, actually found himself liking what Prince Buthelezi had done at the time and found himself completely on the other side, and then started assisting the KwaZulu government. And because he's like, but he's got the right values, he completely changed his mind, and so did some others who were there to spy.
Yes, and the other problem is that caused serious problem. We did not have the patience that Mtwana had. If Mr. Kemp speaks to me in a manner that I don't like, I'll just open a door in his office and stand there in the middle of the door and speak my mind. And then Mr. Kemp goes and reports to Mtwana that he's got a racist.
Oh, wow.
He's got a racist amongst his staff.
Wow.
So Mtwana had a tough job trying to manage this relationship. But at the same time, KwaZulu government gave us resources that we needed to achieve the kind of things that we needed. Go to any former homeland area in South Africa, you will not find a single place with as many schools as you have here in KZN. Because at some point we realized that the government money would not go very far. Because we were least in terms of per capita funding. We received least money as was the government, for obvious reason that we were led by a person who opposed the whole system. I think the disparity was such that at some point other homelands were getting something 120 rands or something like that, and we were only getting 70 something rands per head, per capita. So we then became innovative. We said to our communities, okay, if you can find 20 rands to build a classroom, we'll find as government 20 rands to build another classroom next to yours. We call that a rand for rand scheme. schools mushroomed all over
Fantastic.
KwaZulu, because there was huge drive and eagerness on part of traditional leaders to have their subjects going through school. That program built schools all over, every corner of KwaZulu-Natal. Although we were least funded, we ended up delivering more than those who were properly funded.
Oh, and that's such a beautiful story to tell, and to just listen to, where the initiative from both sides, where government partnership, I mean, it's to think about it now and to speak of it is very revolutionary, in a way that people see revolution in wearing, different colored hats and things of that nature, but a real educational revolution, partnering with a community to say, listen, if you can bring your part and we bring our part, we'll build this together, and everybody benefits from that, and so to this day, people still benefit from that because people would now have education.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's why those of us who grew up in the IFP those days find it difficult when someone say the EFF is more radical than us. I keep looking around and
Radical but impractical.
what the hell are they talking about? Because we fought hard for real change
Absolutely.
in the lives of the people at the most difficult period of their times. The number of doctors that we trained, the number of nurses that we trained, the number of teachers that we trained. It's because you see, people make this mistake. If I invest in you because you want to be a nurse, the important thing is that when you get your certificates, yes, you might be a nurse, but now you've got a key to all sorts of things. You might be employed by a pharmaceutical company. You might be employed in a private clinic. You might be employed in the municipal clinic. All sorts of things now become available to you because we offered you this training to be a nurse. The same goes for a teacher. We were not confining ourselves that every child who goes through a teaching college must come back and teach. Because we understood that when you finish your diploma, your insurance companies are going to be after you. So you'll find the older generation of insurance agencies here in KZN were trained as teachers. Because suddenly they've got a key now that opens opportunities for them wherever they are interested. They are not only locked because you were trained as a teacher, go to the classroom. No. All we were interested in, we must give you the biggest key possible to open as many doors as possible for your life.
Amazing, and that puts a little bit more perspective to, this tradition of giving someone a key at 21. and that key actually represents the doors of opportunity that is open for you once completing your education and once either doing your training in training colleges, and we lack that today. In a way that people are doing certain things, but you'd find that people are locked out of the doors of opportunity. People are sitting at home not having to do those things. But your generation and that generation of people had that opportunity, and it was quite visionary, as you say, of the government at the time. Because what most people don't understand is, I'm from the Cape Province, if you'd like to call it that way, and there was no Bantustan, there was no homeland in the Cape, and so having to understand KwaZulu and learning this history now has become such a phenomenal journey for myself in understanding how KwaZulu operated. And it was amazing. It blows the mind to understand that in this pocket of South Africa, there was education, there was policing, there was nurses, there was skilled individuals of all kinds and classes, and then also the very first non-racial government that was run in KwaZulu-Natal. And this story is not told in history. It's not told to us in books. It's not even told in the Cape. And I mean, people would, their minds, their jaws would drop if they'd understood what was happening in the time of KwaZulu. Under the leadership of the chief minister then, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. So it's incredible, it's phenomenal, Mr. Mfaya. And tell us more, tell us a bit more of that period before things, because things were really good, if one would put it that way, in the midst of apartheid. There were opportunities. There was difficulty, and there was negotiations between Pretoria and the KLA, but a lot of good was taking place in that time.
Look, things were terribly tough, because we were going toe for toe with the central government. They were very much intent on blocking every move that we took. But we were so determined that we were going to go through with this thing, whether they liked it or not. One of the initiatives of the KwaZulu government was to approach the Natal provincial government, provincial administration, and over time convince them that it made no sense to run two administrations here in KZN. Then we had what was called the KwaZulu Natal Indaba. We sat with parties who were serving in the KwaZulu legislature. We sat down with business. We created a model of how KwaZulu-Natal would look like without apartheid.
During apartheid.
During apartheid.
Brilliant.
So of course Pretoria went on a complete spin.
Oh.
On the other hand, our friends in the ANC went on a complete spin. No. This is not negotiating New South Africa. We are just placing an example in front of South Africa that this is how South Africa would look like if you were to get rid of apartheid. So we ran schools together, we ran hospitals together, we repaired roads together, we collected taxes together. And
I mean, this is, for those that don't understand, this was in the height of apartheid, before times of a national emergency. This is the height of apartheid. And here, KwaZulu-Natal, KwaZulu and Natal, the administration, which was not run by the National Party at the time.
Yes.
So that was also a big difference. It was a more liberal, you could remind us of who the party at the time was. And you were able to merge the two in a way to work together. But most people had a problem with that. Now, how does that work, Mr. Mfaya? Why would people have a problem with that?
well, the apartheid government realized that this is a death knell to the apartheid system. Because a white sitting in Transvaal, a white person sitting in Free State, say, damn, this thing can work. That was that was our very intention. That people see it everywhere in South Africa and say, this thing of working together can work. And the amount of goodwill that project generated amongst racial groups in KZN, I mean, was a marvel. Was a marvel to watch. Because it gave people hope. There is another way. We don't have to kill one another.
Absolutely.
There is another way we could go about to achieve these things. We want to achieve. We were careful on the IFP side in that we didn't want to take it all the way. Because you see, we didn't want to form a full government before Mandela was released, before the ANC was unbanned, before the PAC was unbanned. We didn't want the project to go beyond experimental phase, because we were minding that, because there were people who were beginning to say, free Natal, let's just get out of South Africa and have our free Natal. Now that for us in the IFP was taking things a bit too far, because this was meant to be an example for South Africa. It was not meant as a breakaway republic.
Wow, it makes the mind wonder what the possibilities would have been like had that gone that way. And I'm also now reminded of the fact that the start of Inkatha Yenkululeko Yesizwe as the front movement, as the liberation movement working within the country when many of the ANC comrades were in exile. And the very start of the project was to work the apartheid system in a way to still take aim at that. And so doing that in a way to showcase, but there is a rainbow nation of sorts that can work before the rainbow nation. I mean, this is it's not unheard of. I just wish it was told a bit more to people to understand that that's the values, that's the type of values we still embody as an organization today. But at the time, you said it was not to be a breakaway, and I recall reading that the National Party government had so far gone to entice Prince Buthelezi in saying, "Listen, we'll give you KwaZulu, you'll be your own president," to break away, because they just wanted to get rid of the problem. But he said no, and that in itself speaks so much of his leadership, his humility, that it was never for power. He never went back on he never reneged on that agreement and that arrangement he had with Oliver Tambo, I believe, when he had said that we're going to start this cultural movement in order to assist the ANC inside the country. And that speaks volumes, because now he's doing his game changes, big game changes. People's lives are really being changed. Yet he says no to a government where he could have been his own president.
There were some serious dilemmas that we were presented with over time. Because, for instance, this experiment was so successful that you started to ask yourself, should we, shouldn't we?
I can imagine.
Yeah. But he stood steadfast that there can't be an independent KwaZulu-Natal from South Africa. KwaZulu-Natal is part of South Africa, and it will remain so forever. And
Wow.
the level of success, though, of this experiment raised some questions in some of people's minds, even within the IFP. Over time, even the National Party saw an opportunity that here is an experiment that Zulus and the English like. Let's just give it to them and walk away from Natal.
Sure.
He still said no. But then the success of the experience, of the experiment, created a problem in that out of many problems it created is the souring of relationships between us and the ANC. Because now some ANC leaders did not understand the where we were going with this thing. So in the context of the Cold War dynamics, that dragged us into the conflict that people talk about. Because our struggle got to be interpreted by interests of other people other than our own. Things got out of hand very quickly.
That's a good segue into our next segment, and it's something that's very important. You mentioned that there were so many external factors that it also brought about this conflict. Tell us what that was like. Before we get to the National Peace Accord and your negotiations, and I know that you were part of that negotiations together with Mr. Feldgate.
There was no...
When it started, when there was just on the ground what was going on.
We had no plan B. All we were committed to is non-violence in solving South African problems. But we stressed that we are not the Gandhi type of non-violence. If history called upon us to change that, we'll change it. Now that was in relation to the National Party. We never imagined a fight with the ANC. In our wildest of dreams, that was never imagined.
Because you were one, or fighting the same cause, isn't it?
Yes. So violence was never part of our makeup. The Inkatha held workshops to help people like me who come from militant families to understand that a peaceful solution is a peaceful solution, is not a pretext for war. So when this whole thing broke out, it caught us completely napping. completely unexpected. Even now, I don't know how we survived that, because one of the things that this thing did quickly, the ordinary leader of the IFP in a village was a school teacher, a nurse, someone who has something to protect.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, they are getting killed.
Sure.
So their children now, in order to protect what their parents left behind, they've got to move away from this thing. And the IFP members themselves, over time, were no longer impressed by someone who's going to come and talk about the difference between Marx and Lenin.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, and it's such an intense moment, but that's true.
Yeah.
You know, well, that's not going to help us at this point.
Yeah. They were no longer prepared to a French shaman who comes there and say, today our lesson is about the difference between Lenin and Karl Marx.
Mm-hmm. Ideology wouldn't protect your homestead, your home, your belongings, your cattle, your...
Yeah. So suddenly Inkatha needed a different leader from the one they had.
How quickly did this form? Or how quickly did you have to respond to what was happening? Because, of course, when attacked, when provoked, one has to protect yourself.
I think it took a period of about 4 or 5 years.
Oh.
For the IFP to be fully geared to deal with the situation they were in. Because I'm telling you, they were caught completely flat-footed. And it took time. And the internal dynamics, that change, that says Senzo Mfaya is no longer good as the branch chairman Mr. Sbisi is. Because among other things, Mr. Sbisi can carry a knobkiri pretty well. So it became a requirement. Now, that affected the party big time. So it took a lot of time before the party changed to be in the mode to deal with the challenge of the times. Because this war that comes from the ANC, not coming from government, was completely unexpected.
And one was unprepared for that, and no training. What happened at the peace accord when this was finally beginning to take a form of a problem in the country, in a way that everyone was now involved in what we know today as black on black violence? And for however one reads history and the skepticism about black on black violence, and having the actual intelligence networks at that time, and as you say, during the time of the Cold War, so everything was about either you keep South Africa, you go fighting the communists, or you remain a capitalist. And at the time, it's a tap dancing exercise when the ANC are in cahoots with the Soviet Union, but they're singing a different language in London. When some of their comrades are in exile, and very much so at home, we chose this economic path as the IFP then, and in a way that we've had Twana negotiate with the likes of the Reagans and Thatchers, and keeping that side at bay. Yet the IFP was not funded in a way that they could receive military equipment or any form of funding from the Soviet Union at the time. What did you do? How did you scurry to say this is an unfair fight, firstly, and we now know in history that there are more IFP people who had passed on, unfortunately, and many people still live with that trauma. What did you, in terms of those negotiations, because we know from the history books that those negotiations were not fair and were unfair towards us as a party, the IFP, which ended up being the biggest losers, but never the provocateur, never the person who started it.
You see, an idea developed that it was not going to be possible to hold free and fair elections with the level of violence we had in the community. So parties met and decided to form the peace accord. As part of the structures, there was a peace secretariat that myself and so forth served on. There was a peace committee that people like Dr. Frank Mdlalo, Felgate, and them sat on. Okay. There was a period of negotiations before those structures were formed, where we decided how this whole thing was going to be structured, how it was going to be funded, specifically to assist to lower the levels of tensions whilst there were negotiations and leading to negotiations. Because there was this drive to have elections early. The ANC, the big business, the international community, they all wanted the elections now. And they did not want to take time to look at the issues that needed to be looked into to form a new state. I think, unfortunately, it got into the ANC heads that they were not going to, they didn't need to form a new state. They were taking over a working economy. They were taking over a working state. They just have to unplug a white man, put in a black man, and things will work. This thing of saying but the ethos of the thing are not the same anymore. But they were so much in a rush that 94 and the periods before that was just about how do we unplug this white man and put in a black man. There was no attempt to deal with fundamental issues that affected the country. The other thing that affected the negotiations rather negatively is, whilst Madiba was a very positive force in the country, very, very positive, but we became lazy and acted as if Madiba was going to live forever. some of the things we needed to do, we didn't do because we trusted Madiba. We didn't take time, for instance, to look at the powers of the President of the Republic as opposed to the head of government. We only learned later that there's a huge difference between Madiba and Jacob Zuma. So it's something we could have taken a bit of time in '94 to resolve, but we didn't. The issue of the traditional leadership in the country is not resolved even up to today, because we were in a rush to have elections and form a government. Again, big business in this country and influential foreign governments were behind that rush. It was as if there's a rush that there must be a new government in South Africa before I die. I'll do everything. Freedom in my lifetime. So without caring whether that freedom is making sure of all the necessary steps that needed to be taken.
Wow, I've never looked at it like that. And that's quite profound that you say. I would say now I must agree with that sentiment of yours that you expressed, that it was rushed. It was quite a get it done, and that explains why we are last on that ballot paper as a sticker in joining that election. But still today the fight of traditional leaders and the inclusion of Ingonyama land, and having to still fight for that and fight that legislation which was passed in the KwaZulu Legislative Assembly still stands. And it's quite history was quite unfair to us, would you say, Mr. Mfaya?
Yes, it was, but I would say more than us, it was unfair to South Africa because we lost huge opportunities to put things right. Well, this is my personal view. I cannot speak for the IFP in this regard. You see, there is a conflict in the Congo. People are fighting. There is, amongst the tribes in the Congo, there is a majority tribe. Before you sit down with all these people who are all citizens of the Congo and resolve fundamental issues between them, and you rush to elections, you suddenly have institutionalized conflict. And you've shifted resources from one side to another. So you've not done a single thing to resolve that conflict. In fact, you've made it worse. And people wonder why there are so many conflicts that are unresolvable all over the continent. It's because we stupidly institutionalize conflicts, because elections in all these countries are not about those countries, but they're about us. We want to get into a plane with a new flag of a new country and say, we have made it.
That's so true.
So, but that's Senzo Mfaya speaking. Each time I'm told of a new election in Africa, I cringe, because I know the implication that some liberal sitting somewhere in Holland or Germany or Greece or wherever is pushing this thing, get a flag of a new country, raise it in the plane all the way home. They don't quite care what happens to the country after that, because now they've institutionalized conflict. I think with our circumstances in Africa, we need to have the strength and the guts to redefine even words like democracy. What does it mean? What does it mean to us? Does it mean the same thing that it means in Germany? Does it mean the same thing that it means in America? American democracy, for instance, personally, I'll walk over it. I don't want that thing. That's not.
Absolutely, Mr. Mfaya, what you are saying, and to our viewers also and our listeners, it's such a true topic and something we'd have to unpack on another day. Because it is something that you very rightfully say is democracy working in Africa, and is it specific to each African state? Because much like the European countries, we are not a homogeneous society. Not everybody looks the same, speaks the same language, and has the same values and cultural values or background. And so therefore it is already something that is, it's a difficult makeup. And so that's why what we have done as a party and as a country is accept this thing of democracy, but how it looks like must be defined by us and this generation. And so I think that's perhaps something we must take more seriously and deeply in order to resolve these things, and how to engage with them, because forever we will have movements in our country, and we can see the tides that change. We can see the differences in breakaway political organizations that happen, but it is all a wrestle for power, and not a wrestle really to solve the issues of the country. It's just to who wants to have that seat. But it leaves.
For instance, because we've allowed this thing to germinate and grow, politics have ceased completely to be about service delivery. It's now about personalities. You sit on your sofa and you open TV, there are all these fools who jump up and down, who claim some kind of stake in leadership, but into a system that has got no way of dealing with our issues as we face them. One of the critical issues in my mind, at least, is that, you see, in the continent, in Africa, in South Africa, and everywhere, the issue of nation building is still very critical. The issue of nation building is more important than elections, as far as I see things.
Wow.
And nation building, it's a very involved process. You work on nation building. You don't wake up one morning and say, Rainbow Nation, and then hurrah, there's a Rainbow Nation. Look at, after 30 years, look at how still fragile what we talk about in South Africa. A building burns in the center of Johannesburg. I'm not talking about ordinary persons in the street. Every official who should have a constitution in their pocket, they are jumping up and down, they want to burn the constitution. this building is burning and people are dying because of the constitution. This provincial official, national government official, local government official, what does that tell you? That tells you that, for goodness sake, we don't have a South African nation. The DA bans the South African flag just now. That is an outcome of a country that doesn't have a nation. You must look very closely at these things sometimes. Terms and things that are feared by liberals and communists in equal measure. Ask yourself why.
Well, there we have it. Well, I would like to know why. And I'm sure those who are listening to us right now would also like to know why. Do share, Mr. Mfaya.
You see,
why is it so tough for us to be one? Why is it so tough for us to
because
be a nation?
The two tools of analysis believe that the problem of solving the world affairs and the management of human affairs is still now. It's known. This is how it will happen. There's no room for
anything else.
Yeah.
And what are those two things? What are those two things?
Go to a meeting of liberals and say, hey guys, there is a new way of looking at democracy that involves traditional leaders and this and this and this. You are likely to be hung in front of the city hall. In equal measure, that's what you'll get from communists. So, all I'm saying is the human affairs are more dynamic and more fluid. We need to open space for new ideas, for new considerations. So each time I hear an idea being hated by liberals, and I turn around, the same idea is hated by communists, I know that in all probabilities it's a correct idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But again, that's not IFP, that's Senzo Mfaya.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Mfaya. I mean, we won't. I think we must have you again. I think there's so much more that you have to say and to share that you're not perhaps, it's a very first conversation and that you're not alluding to right now. And I can just tell that there's so much more deeper things that you'd like to go into, just sitting here and knowing that perhaps we need a next panel discussion. And with the work that you are doing for the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation in upholding his legacy, that, I mean, I think needs to be told the world over once more and a few times more in our own country, because a lot of people do not know. Certainly there will be a space for that, and a space must be carved out for that, because he was ahead of his time. And you, by virtue of being there in those times, were ahead of your time. You think differently than most elderly South Africans that I know for certain, and that are at home that didn't participate in these things. It was beyond, you guys were there. So we look up to you in that sense, in a way that, you've had that experience and you see the world differently. But it is time now, as the world is changing so dynamically, and as we have all these lovely tools and things at our disposal, there is never shall we not look back and still rely on the wisdoms of the elders who have built what we are enjoying today. And so that's so important, such a key intergenerational thing, and it's absolute privilege to have you. And in closing, I'd just like to thank you for doing this for us.
No, but in closing, I'll just say, Umntwana was a master, an absolute master, because I grew up in Dwetwe, in a village under a mountain. There is a river running down below the mountain. How on earth did he see value in me?
Wow.
And invested as much as he did. I'm not the only one. There are many people that he did that for. That's a question I've never been able to answer, except to say I accept that could only have been done by a master. To take me where I was from and invest as much as he did in my life. I don't need to explain it. I just have to accept it.
Absolutely, and the gratitude for that, and I hope that you do the same in this generation to the people you identify in your community, in your family, and do the same that was done unto you, because that's how we can carry a legacy forward. If only we could be as good as Mtwana.
Can I take the fifth?
If we only were in America, there's no such thing as the Fifth Amendment here. I mean, for my lack of knowledge there, I wouldn't say, wait, the Fifth Amendment might be something on the presidency. But thank you very much, Mr. Mfaya. I really enjoyed the conversation, and do share with us some more. We are here. You know where to find us. And that's closing for our listeners and viewers at home. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Inkathacast. This is the IFP Untold series, and we've just spoken to Senzo Mfaya, the CEO of the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation, and one of the IFP stalwarts, an absolute leader, a man in his own right that has been through the times, been through a lot. And we are also thankful and grateful for that experience. And to have you here today was an absolute honor. I'm certainly honored to be able to be part of this conversation. Your history is gorgeous. It's beautiful. I hope we can hear more of it. Thank you so much, guys. And stay tuned for our next episode as we tell the stories of Inkatha, the stories untold and the stories close to your heart. Make sure you join, like, and subscribe to our IFP YouTube channel. That's at IFP. Thank you very much.